Good evening. I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. We go to Massachusetts. There's political news there, but also there's a deal to learn about the day after the Tsarnaev manhunt. Michael Graham, my colleague, is the host of the Michael Graham Show each day, weekdays, noon to 3 p.m. on 4 stations in the Boston and Massachusetts area. Listening to me right now, AM 830, WCRN in Worcester and Boston, WBNW 1120 AM, Concord Metro West, AM 1390, WPLM, Plymouth Cape Cod, and AM 970 WESO in Southbridge. Michael, a very good evening to you. Ed Markey. He is going to be the next senator. He's going to take the John Kerry seat. Who is he? What do we need to know about him outside of Massachusetts? Good evening, Michael.
Well, first of all, if you're outside of Massachusetts, you've probably run into Ed Markey more than we have. He is the absentee congressman. We call him the representative of Chevy Chase, Maryland, because he has a house that no one has ever seen. It's kind of like the ghostly house. No, he's never there. He's the water. There's no water turned on, but it's just enough of a residence to meet his legal requirements. And so he hasn't been in Massachusetts in years. He's been in the Congress since the 70s, and he's widely viewed as a placeholder until Joseph P. Kennedy III, gets old enough to shave, and then he'll step into that seat and hold on to it for 50-some years, because Massachusetts voters are notoriously lacking in imagination, and so they generally do what they are told, and they certainly did that tonight. Ed Markey ran. Everyone agrees, including the Ed Markey people, a lackluster campaign, and yet he handily won over a much more spirited and compelling Congressman Stephen Lynch. On the Republican side, it doesn't really matter what happened. None of these Republicans had a chance, but I would like to offer just a word of warning to any of your listeners who might get an email blast asking for money for Gabriel Gomez up here. Save your money. Gabriel Gomez supported President Obama in 2008. Earlier this year, he wrote a letter to Democratic Governor Deval Patrick asking him to appoint Gabriel Gomez to the seat as the interim senator, and pledging that if he did, he would support President Obama, particularly on issues like gun control and amnesty for illegal immigrants. So the only question in Massachusetts is which Obama supporter is going to get the most votes, and it's going to be Democratic Congressman Ed Markey.
It's a blue state. Michael Graham gives you the facts. Do not expect any competition here, because we now move on to a story that dominates the mystery of the Tsarnaev brothers. First mystery, Watertown. You know Boston intimately. Watertown, I'm told, is a gentrified, extremely attractive place to live. It is not a place where it's hard to find people. The lawns are big, the houses are big, the streets are wide. How is it that the state police, and they had air, land, sea, they were overrun with armored cars. How is it that they missed Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, whom we know was wounded, 19 years old, and probably didn't have a weapon? It's unclear, but probably did not when they found him. How is it that they missed him for 24 hours and locked down the T? Michael, what has happened to Boston? You locked the T. Is there a T station in Watertown?
No, there's not a T stop in Watertown, but you could get to a commuter rail line if you wanted to. A couple of things. First of all, I live in the next town over, Waltham, which was also shut down because it's adjacent to Watertown. It's not quite, it's a little more blue collar than you described it, but the neighborhood he was in was certainly not the kind of neighborhood where you'd be, dodging cats as you dash through the alley. And the spot where he was, which was a driveway where there was a boat sitting parked, less than 200 yards away from where the shootout had occurred. If the police had just done a regular grid search, everything would have been fine. Here's what's fascinating. Governor Patrick shut down the entire region. The T, just like the subway, serves, it doesn't just serve Manhattan, it serves the region. They shut down the entire regional bus and T system. So people down in Quincy, which would be like saying you had a suspect in Midtown Manhattan, you're going to shut down the Staten Island ferry. People down in Quincy couldn't get on a bus. They couldn't get on the T. It made no sense. Now, I got up that morning and the announcement was made that, Waltham and the town I live in the suburbs of Boston was shut down. And I got in my car and I drove in because I had an appointment at 7 that morning with some people who come over from Ireland for a big business adventure that I was helping them with. So I drive to the Seaport Hotel, right on the water, down at the Boston Harbor at the World Trade Center. I have breakfast with my friends. I start to leave. The owner of the hotel happens to know me. He says, "Michael, I'm sorry, I can't let you leave. We're in lockdown." I just waited for him to turn his back, and I drove away. I drove on the streets of Boston. I parked illegally on the streets of Boston. It was magnificent. Nobody did anything.
It looked like the day after the end of the world. There was nobody on the street except for Graham, right? You were it.
Exactly. And my poor wife, who works in sales, has to actually go to appointments.
Right.
She couldn't go to an appointment that was easily 15 miles away from Waltham because of the lockdown.
Michael, people lost money that day. Do they get it back?
No, of course not. And but this is what's frustrating is, I don't want to be critical of law enforcement any more than necessary. They have a tough job.
I understand, but it seemed excessive from the outside. It seemed like they panicked a little bit and overdid it.
We lost a police officer at the MIT, the campus police, and we have an injured MBTA officer. So I keep that in mind. At the same time, when President Obama said today that the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security did their jobs, I was what are you, crazy? How can you say that Tamerlan Tsarnaev, who had been identified for us by the Russians, who had been questioned by the FBI, and then was apparently completely forgotten about as he traveled back to Dagestan and back to the United States, as he's posting Islamist videos on YouTube, and then the bombs go off, and is anyone looking for him? No. He's not on any list. Then they get photos of the guy. They still don't know who he is. They had to post the photos on TV so that we, the people of Boston, could tell the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI who he is. From beginning to end, including the final shootout, where an estimated 400 rounds were fired by the police at an unarmed 19-year-old bleeding to death in a boat. I hate to say it, but the fact is President Obama's wrong. We did not get the job done. And by the way, John, the biggest example of the job not getting done, the bomb went off. Right. With all the information we had about this guy, he was practically wearing a "I'm with Jihad" T-shirt the day before these bombs went off. For him to be as open, as blatant, and then to get away with it, that's not doing your job.
Dzhokhar Tsarnaev now has a public defender. I understand a very experienced public defender handled the shoe bomber case once upon a time. There is a federal law here that can charge him with the death penalty, but Massachusetts has no death penalty. Has anybody commented from the governor's level or the state level about the death penalty?
Well, I'll tell you, the callers into the Michael Graham show are definitely pro-death penalty for this guy. They want to see him whacked. He has 4 public defenders, John. 4. Right. Because that's what we do here in Massachusetts. We find someone who comes here as an immigrant, supposedly to make a better life. They instead get on the dole the entire time. The family's collected more than $100,000.
I saw that. Over 10 years, $100,000 of all kinds of aid, yes.
But don't get lost in the 10-year part. They were only on the dole about 5 out of those 10 years. So they were collecting well over $20,000 a year. And we're now finding out they got additional benefits for school, scholarships, Pell Grants, etc. On top of that, I talked to a state representative who's part of the investigation today, and she says that when they say well above $100,000, we could be talking about $200,000 or $300,000 in total benefits to this family. And now to throw 4 taxpayer-funded attorneys, 4, at a guy who, let's all face it, there's no doubt about his guilt. We've got the pictures, we've got the admission, we've got the explosion. We've got him lying in the boat, shot up. I mean, you don't need Perry Mason to come work this case, and now he'll have 4 lawyers on our expense.
And the people of Massachusetts, they're aware of the fact that he goes away, that he goes to the federal system, that he's probably going to spend the rest of his life in Florence, Colorado. That's justice. Massachusetts accepts it. Is that correct?
Well, remember, Massachusetts is a very blue state, and there's a lot of opposition here to the death penalty. But it's interesting when Republicans in the legislature tried to get a vote on moving forward on at least having hearings on whether or not to bring back the death penalty. The Democrats who run the legislature, they have about 90% of the seats. They killed it without even allowing a vote because they don't want to have that vote right now because passions are so high. But I've been saying on my show since the day after these people were killed and captured, and we said it again 2 days ago, that in Massachusetts, with Governor Patrick and President Obama leading the way, this guy was never going to get the death penalty. What's disturbing is, for example, just one headline from the papers this morning that there was a woman's DNA found on some of the
right. That's a mystery that's open. Yes,
could be anything. But
right.
So you're telling me we have to negotiate away the death penalty to find out who she is? I have a better idea. Why not refuse to Mirandize the guy, treat him like an enemy combatant, squeeze him for all the information, and then you can decide what to do with him.
Michael Graham is the Michael Graham Show host each day from noon to 3 p.m. on 4 stations in the Massachusetts area, and soon for more. Michael Graham, I very much appreciate the fact that Watertown was not under siege as we thought that day, that if I follow the reporting carefully, the police missed the street that Joshkar Tsarnaev was hiding on. They just missed it that day, and all of Boston lost a day's work. I'm John Batchelor. This is The John Batchelor Show.